You want to see what real independent journalism funded by the people for the people looks like?
You ever heard a story like this in America?
You're looking at it.
Congratulations for always being somewhere where mainstream media is not.
Flint, Michigan.
See you in Nevada.
Thanks to people like you, we can get the truth. Corporate media, they've been lying to us for years, and you're going straight to the people.
You are the man. I'm glad you're here.
For as low as 16 cents a day, you'll keep us on the ground, covering the important stories the corporate media covers up.
JT Cestkowski with Status Coup. Department of Homeland Security stormtroopers have terrorized another Chicago neighborhood, and the video is pretty shocking.
Hey, come on, get back!
Alma. Where is she at? I don't know.
That's from Chicago's East Side on Tuesday, and what you just saw there is not unique. It is now a pattern that we have seen repeated in neighborhood after neighborhood in and around Chicago, where Department of Homeland Security officers are going into these neighborhoods and terrorizing people for the sake of the terror. The cruelty is the point, because they are being followed around by camera crews who are videotaping everything they do and then editing together propaganda that they post on social media for red meat for Trump's base. This is coverage from the Chicago Sun-Times of what happened on the East Side on Tuesday. I want to point out that this picture, I feel like, is just such a symbol of what we are seeing play out in Chicago right now. These militarized law enforcement officers with the federal government. You would look at these and think that these are National Guard soldiers or maybe members of the military. They are not. They are just Border Patrol officers, ICE agents, and similar agencies that are decked out like this, going into an American city, occupying it, and terrorizing people, much like this officer is here, pointing a weapon just inches from a man's face as he raises up his hands in a show of nonviolence. Federal agents chased a car through a residential neighborhood on the southeast side of Chicago Tuesday, and then intentionally crashed into the car in a risky maneuver restricted by some police departments nationwide. The maneuver was caught on local security cameras, which showed the car being hit by the Fed's vehicle, leading the occupants of the car to fall out while it was moving. The occupants then fled on foot as agents ran behind. The commotion attracted a crowd of onlookers and protesters who converged near the scene of the crash at 105th Street and Avenue N on the east side. A large number of armed Customs and Border Patrol agents responded to the crowd by hurling smoke grenades, shooting pepper balls, and deploying at least 3 rounds of tear gas over the area, even with children and seniors in the area. At least 4 protesters were detained. Quote, "When you're using these tactics, you are asking people to be hospitalized," unquote, said Oscar Sanchez, a member of a rapid response network that tracks immigration enforcement activity. The situation Tuesday is the latest incident in which federal agents have brought aggressive immigration enforcement techniques to a Chicago neighborhood and resorted to using tear gas and other munitions on crowds nearby. That's the tactic that we saw in the Brighton Park neighborhood. We were on the ground for that at the time, and we saw police officers insert themselves between the Department of Homeland Security officers and the protesters who were there to try and drive the federal government out of their neighborhood because they say that they feel less safe with this federal presence in their community. It didn't matter that the police were there inserting themselves between the federal officers and the protesters. The Department of Homeland Security officers popped tear gas anyway, used flashbangs anyway, and even used tear gas on the police. Because these officers are so clearly living out an action movie fantasy in what they are doing. The crash happened around 11 a.m., said a Chicago police spokesperson, who said officers responded to document the crash but did not help with federal operations. I'll note here that for protesters and a lot of people living in these communities, they don't feel like the police aren't helping the Department of Homeland Security. They feel like the police are helping the federal government because what they're doing is crowd control, keeping the protesters back and giving space for the Department of Homeland Security to operate in Chicago, thereby allowing DHS to carry out whatever mission it wants to in these communities. Security video from a local business and shared with the Sun-Times appears to show federal agents in a white SUV pursuing a red SUV before ramming the rear end of the car, causing the car to crash. Here's that video that the Sun-Times is referencing. A U.S. Department of Homeland Security spokesperson said in a statement that the Border Patrol agents were conducting an immigration enforcement traffic stop when the car allegedly rammed the Fed's vehicle. And I'm putting a lot of emphasis on allegedly because the Department of Homeland Security has proved itself time and again in these raids that it is carrying out in Chicago not to be a trustworthy actor. So many times they have come out and advanced a story or advanced a narrative because it is convenient for their political goals there in Chicago. And then over the coming hours and days, it turns out not to be true. And it's not just me saying this. A federal judge in their ruling also said the same thing, siding with the state of Illinois in a lawsuit about deploying National Guard troops to Illinois, in part because they said they could not trust what DHS's lawyers were telling them. The feds did not say where that initial incident happened, and it was not caught on the security footage shared by the Sun-Times, so you just have to take the Department of Homeland Security's word for it. The feds admitted to using a precision immobilization technique or pit maneuver to stop the car, in which agents hit the rear back corner of the car being pursued, causing it to spin out. Chicago police are barred from using a collision with another vehicle during a pursuit. Other police departments nationwide ban or restrict the maneuver, which has led to many deadly crashes nationwide. And I'll note that near me there is a police department that largely does not engage in high-speed chases with vehicles, because of the danger it poses to the surrounding community. Instead, they just get the license plate off the vehicle and know that they can trace that back to the address that the vehicle is registered to, interview people there, find out who was driving the vehicle, and over time, they will make an arrest because they know that the person who is evading arrest cannot stay vigilant 100% of the time, and they will eventually get the person they're looking for. ICE could use some of those same patient tactics that are more safe for the community if they really wanted to carry out this dehumanizing mission that they are doing in Chicago in a manner that is safe. But the cruelty is the point. The power fantasy for these officers is the point. It's why they're doing this. They're doing it for the benefit of those cameras that are following them around so that they can score political points with Trump's base. After the crash, dozens of people gathered at the crash scene in protest, leading to a chaotic confrontation with federal officers. Some protesters allegedly threw objects at federal agents, Chicago police said. The feds then used tear gas and other chemical irritants on the crowd. In a video posted to Facebook, parents can be seen running from the area carrying a baby in a carrier. In addition to residents, 13 Chicago Police Department members also were overcome by tear gas while on scene to try to de-escalate tensions between protesters and federal agents, police said. So that's that pattern because that's what we saw in the Brighton Park neighborhood. The feds used tear gas even on police officers who were there to keep the crowd at bay because, again, the cruelty is the point. We saw with our own eyes close up as the Department of Homeland Security officers were leaving the Brighton Park neighborhood after they shot a woman. They're leaving that scene. They could drive out. The road was clear before them. Their vehicles were on the way out, and they were popping tear gas and throwing flashbang grenades out the windows of their moving vehicles, even as they left the scene, just to harm those protesters. And in one case, I watched a tear gas canister that was thrown towards the crowd actually rolled under the porch of a nearby home and filled it with tear gas. I went back the next day and interviewed the man who owned that home. He wouldn't go on camera, but he did tell me that there was no one home at the time that happened, but that was lucky. And it was lucky that it went to that house because elsewhere on that block, there were elderly folks and people who could not easily leave their home if the tear gas had gone into their yard. And I wanted to read just this section from CBS News's coverage of the incident on Tuesday because I feel like it so perfectly sums up how people in the Chicagoland area are feeling right now. Quote, neighbors said they ended up caught in the tear gas and chaos. Quote, I feel like they were antagonizing us. They were asking, when are you guys gonna leave? We just want you guys to leave. We don't want no drama. We don't want no violence. We just want you guys to leave, unquote, said neighbor Madeline Anaya. And that is such a perfect summary of what I heard from person after person after person. Dozens of people who I interviewed in and around the Chicago area on our recent 3-week reporting trip down there was that nearly unanimously people said they feel less safe with ICE and other federal agents in their neighborhood. They say they feel less safe because of this mission that is going on down there right now. And the only reason they're protesting is because the federal agents are there. When the federal agents leave those communities, as I saw in Brighton Park, when the federal agents left, the crowd of protesters disperses. They go back home. They no longer have a reason to protest because that invading force, that invading federal force is now gone from their communities and they relax. The federal government is inserting itself to create a scene to justify further use of force against American citizens. So in addition to this just being about cruelty, I'll also say that what is happening in Chicago right now and in Portland and other cities around the country is also meant to be a distraction. The president has learned that this is a great way to get headlines, so he will continue to do it because right now he wants to distract, one, from the economic pain that so many working class Americans are feeling, and two, wants to distract from the Jeffrey Epstein files and the scandal that he is implicated in there. Representative Thomas Massey and Representative Ro Khanna in the House of Representatives have introduced a discharge petition that would force the Department of Justice to release many of the documents in the so-called Epstein files, their investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, that so far the Department of Justice has not released. They needed one more member of Congress to support their discharge petition, and they have just gotten that support because a Democrat won just a couple of weeks ago a special election in the state of Arizona, giving them that last needed vote of support. However, that member of Congress is not being allowed to be seated right now by Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House. Mike Johnson is blaming the government shutdown as a reason for not seating that congressperson. But in reality, it's because that's the deciding vote on the Epstein documents discharge petition. And that's the dynamic that a lot of corporate press is not acknowledging right now, is what a distraction, and a painful distraction to be sure, Chicago, Portland, and these other communities are right now. So if you value the on-the-ground perspective that we have brought from Chicago, going right there in the thick of these protests and into these communities where ICE is brutalizing people, if that on-the-ground perspective is important to you, please go to statuscoup.com/join. For $5 a month, you would help us stay on the ground. We were in Chicago for 3 weeks. We wanted to be there longer, but those reporting trips are expensive. So if you can give us any support to try and send us back there or help us support future reporting trips, we would greatly appreciate it. And it also helps us produce videos like this that call out the real, unvarnished truth of what is happening in the country right now.